Welcome to the Registered Investment Advisor Podcast, where financial services marketing expert Seth Green interviews experts, executives, and top producers to share can't-miss tips on how they successfully manage their financial service firms, grow their businesses, create great relationships, and influence the industry. And now, here's your host, Seth Green.
Welcome to the RIA podcast. This is your host, Seth Green. Today, I have the good fortune to be joined by David Kakish from RIA WorkSpace. David, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Seth, great to be with you.
Let's go back in time a little bit. How'd you get in the business in the first place?
You know what? It's a great question. I was working at a Fortune 500 company, and I remember the moment that this happened in the sense of I worked with the enterprise space, really big businesses on security. And I was working with a small business that was in a remote market that basically said, hey, David, you know your stuff. I know you can really help me. But when something happens, I call my local guy and not you. So I need to go back and I need to check with him. And that was kind of my cue that I needed to go out on my own and get started.
Absolutely. We've all been there. So how did RIA WorkSpace get started? Because that isn't just managing money.
Yeah, that's how I got started. So we got started in providing outsourced IT services and support to generic businesses in the Chicagoland area. And, our first client we ever signed up was an RIA. And then throughout the years, we just discovered that we really love this space and they love us. And we said, let's double down on that and, continue to work with RIAs. And that's where RIA WorkSpace was created, where we focus on providing help desk, IT security, cybersecurity, and IT compliance to the RIAs. And, the basic message is, an RIA might have 5 or 10 people, but your requirements for cybersecurity and IT compliance are exponentially a lot more than that business down the street with 5 or 10 people.
Absolutely. There's a whole host of different issues and regulations. So how did you end up? I'm sure you had to customize what you were offering and how you were delivering it for such a highly regulated industry as ours. Talk a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, again, we come from the enterprise space. And what I mean by that is we worked with really large companies, 500 plus employees. And the reality is, when you talk to an RIA with, again, I'll just use 10 employees regardless of AUM, but when you talk to an RIA with 10 employees, their requirements for cybersecurity and IT compliance are a lot more like that company with 500 employees. And what we noticed is just sort of, the generic IT consultant couldn't wrap their head around that. They were either, treating it, they'd work with a really big IT provider and, they were just treated like a small fish, or they'd work with a small IT provider that just couldn't wrap their heads around simple things that were required for compliance in the RIA space. And so we just took these enterprise tools and we gave it to an RIA with 10 people and we just kept it simple.
That was really smart. So what are some of the biggest issues you're seeing RIAs dealing with and how are you helping them?
Yeah, there's a lot. Maybe I'll pick a couple of them. So one of the really big ones is obviously everybody's working from home today, right? Or you're in the office, you're at home, hotel room, coffee shops, even though people don't want to admit that, right? And so how do you secure those devices when they're in the field? And, the big thing is let's make sure we've got a security wrap around that device, regardless of where it's at, whether it's at home or a hotel and things like that. So that's a big one. Probably the other big one is email security, right? Basic things like, please make sure you have your multi-factor authentication turned on, period. No excuses, right? And, a fancy term we call DLP or data loss prevention. And that's if David sends out an email that has a social security number or account number, can we set it up so it automatically encrypts and send it out or at least stops it? So, those are some of the things that we're seeing that are pretty common.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Who is an ideal client for you?
If you're an RIA, you're independent, and you're looking for somebody to really help you when it comes to IT compliance, cybersecurity, help desk, a one-stop shop, we make a lot of sense. Most of our clients are 5 to 25 employees, regardless of AUM. Obviously, we have clients that are much bigger and smaller, but that's kind of the ideal client. That's kind of the pain threshold for IT and cybersecurity has just gone too high, or they're not sleeping well at night and they want to work with somebody that sort of understands the uniqueness of this vertical.
you've put the, I mean, the RIA workspace is pretty unique. Do you have any competition? And if so, how do you differentiate yourself?
That is a great question. The vast majority of our competition is just like a local IT provider, right? And they start talking to us, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, why have not? Where were you, 2 years ago or 5 years ago? I couldn't find you soon enough." And that just seems to be a recurring theme. So we're trying to do a better job of getting our, the word out there. But we're sort of that well-kept secret, and we think of ourselves as as a small giant in this space. That's what we try to be.
Well, you segued into my next question, which is how are folks finding you?
We're trying to create a lot of really great educational content. Some people want to do it themselves, and that's fine. A lot of people don't want to do it themselves and end up reaching out to us. But, I'll give you a really, really big one that we see time and time again. People are paying for their Microsoft subscription, and they're using 20% of what's available. And it's kind of like you've got the plane, you just need a better pilot that sits in the cockpit that knows what all those gadgets are.
Well, geez, that makes me want to ask. Yeah, we're using our Microsoft subscription. It's funny. I tell people that I use a similar analogy for the marketing automation software Infusionsoft. And
Yep.
I tell people you bought a Ferrari, but you didn't put any gas in the tank.
Exactly. That's exactly what we see. There's so many. I mean, I'll give you a really simple one that very few people know about this. So if you go to security.microsoft.com and you're the administrator on your Microsoft subscription, it's going to give you a Microsoft security score. You're going to give you a security score. Most people have a score that's like in the 20s. Right. So if you're listening to this, just go to security.microsoft.com. Again, if you're the administrator, it's going to give you a score. It's in the 20s. We really help our clients get up to, in the 80s rather than in the 20s. And we generally do that within 90 days of working together. That's like a simple free tool. It's an objective score that Microsoft gives you. And so, go to your IT provider and say, hey, our score is this, help us get there. Yeah, that's a real basic, a real simple example of one of the things that we do.
That's awesome. And I will go get my score as soon as we're done. You work with RIAs around the country. Give us an example, and you can withhold, identities if it's confidential, but kind of talk about a client that they hired you, what the problem was they were struggling with, and then kind of what that magical transformation was on the other side after working with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very common theme. There's in this space, they're really frustrated. And, I call it the IT pain threshold, right? Yeah, they can put up with stuff, we can put up stuff. And then there's just a camel that breaks the straw that breaks a camel's back. I think the biggest thing that we see time and time again is just a lack of understanding of the uniqueness of the RIA vertical. Again, cybersecurity and IT compliance. What keeps the CCO up at night? It's probably like, hey, what if something happens to our data? What if we get compromised, right? And it's not that the local IT provider is not aware of that. It's just they don't realize that it's exponentially more important for them. So one of the things that we do is we're really taking them and we're maximizing their Microsoft subscription. I'll leave it with, there's a lot that goes into it, but I'll leave you with this thought. They're no longer managing, they feel like they need to manage their IT vendor, right? And with us, that just changes. Like all these things are taken care of and they don't have to worry about managing us because we understand the unique challenges of the RIA when it comes to help desk, cybersecurity, IT compliance, and so on.
That makes a lot of sense. How are those RIAs finding you?
You know what? So we've got your marketing guys. We believe a lot in the direct response marketing. So we've got some things that are on there, but we do a lot of content marketing too that goes there. And then we're doing different things on different podcast shows and things like that. So a tool that, if you're okay with it, that I'll share with the listener, because everything I talked about, we put it at riaworkspace.com/podcast. And right there's the information on the Microsoft security score. So if you missed it, you can get that. And then we also have a 29-point checklist that you can give your IT provider and say, hey, are these things that we have in place? I'm hesitant to get too much into the technical things because we're going to lose people, right? But I want to give them a checklist. It's not gated. They can get this information. They can use it. You don't have to put in your email or anything like that. So I just want to share that with the listener so they can actually walk away with something that helps them. And that's kind of how we're doing it from a marketing side, Seth.
That makes a lot of sense. Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you're doing?
You know what? I love helping small giants. And what I mean by that is, the RIAs tend to be 5 to 25 employees. They're small businesses, but they have a really big impact with their own clients. And I just love working with that, small business owner, that small business entrepreneur, and just that, wants to have a really big impact. I'm one of them. And I love working with, with those entrepreneurs that are in the same position.
All right. Well, we greatly appreciate your time. We know it's incredibly valuable. For our folks watching and listening, all of our RIAs who want to learn more about eliminating their IT headaches, where is the best place for them to go to learn more about you?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is just to RIAWorkspace.com. That's the best place to go. And then if there's something on this podcast that, sparked your interest and you want some more, we put all that material at RIAWorkspace.com/podcast. You don't need to put an email or anything. All that's just available for you to consume.
All right. Well, thanks again, David from RIAWorkspace.com. Check out RIAWorkspace.com/podcast. David, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks everybody for watching or listening. We will talk to you or see you next time.